Joining us in the Informer studio, Jack Karikas, who has a mother, I believe, in the aged care facility.
Mother-in-law. Yes.
Mother-in-law at the aged care facility at St Basil's in Fawkner, and also, as we had an opportunity last week to speak to Nicole Dunn, who's from Empower Aged Care, who understands very well the challenges that the aged care facility and fraternity have had to face over the last few months, especially with the COVID experience. I just want to get a handle on what's transpired. So Nicole, just bear with us one moment. I'll get Jack to take us through how they came to understand the emergency in the aged care home at St Basil's, which is run by the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of Australia. When did it first appear to you that there were problems?
So absolutely, and thank you, George, for the opportunity here. The first semblance of issue came up 2 weeks ago when we were notified of the first 5 or so cases of COVID positive in the residents there. We were assured that they were going through the testing protocols and they were going to test all the residents and come back to us. It was very rushed because it was basically a quick phone call asking us for consent, which we obviously consented to immediately. Mm-hmm. We waited 48 hours and we were told that our mother-in-law at that stage was negative. And we were assured that she was in the wing where there was no positive cases at all, right? At that stage, we asked them if they were going to evacuate all the positive cases, and we're told no, they can't get them into the hospital system, right? They've been directed to leave them there. It's the best treatment for them, but they're isolated and there's no cross-contamination, for want of a better word, amongst the residents that were there.
Now, were you still able to visit your mother-in-law?
There was no visiting at this stage. All visiting was seized. So the only way to talk to our mother-in-law was via a Skype call or a phone call, and you had to book that in.
Now, from the evidence that you had, could you see whether staff was using PPE, the safety protocols, masks and whatever?
Not at all times, no. So
did that alarm you at any stage?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As we were getting updates from the centre that there were more and more cases arising, we were getting very alarmed, particularly when the numbers started to get around 30 individuals, and we said, well, there's 30 residents and they're still on site. The wing can only hold X number of individuals because you've got 120 residents. Mm. So that's when we started getting alarmed.
You knew the lie of the land at Fawkner. You knew the facility and how it worked. Yep. And you could see that problems would emerge eventually.
Absolutely. And the biggest issue for us was that a lot of the residents where my mother-in-law is are still quite mobile, right? Okay. And we refer to them as wanderers. They wander across the centre because they're free to move as they go, but they were wandering into the COVID positive site.
We were talking with Nicole Dunn last week in an interview that we did on The Informer, and Nicole told us about the wanderers and the challenges that presents for staff, especially during difficult times, and these are the worst of times. COVID-19 has challenged just about everyone at every level of our lives, and some organisations are struggling, some have been overwhelmed, and this appears to be the case at the St Basil's home at Fawkner. Now, when did it get really desperate for you? When did you get an inkling that this was getting not only very, very difficult, but was almost reaching a stage of catastrophic?
Yep. So Tuesday night, that's just passed, so we're talking about a week ago now, we were informed that all the existing staff at St Basil's would be told to stand down, self-isolate for 2 weeks, and they would not be allowed back into the site unless they were negative.
And who would take over?
And the federal government was coming in, and they were going to bring in their own team.
So seconded team from outside?
Who are going to run St Basil's in the interim, right? So we thought, well, that's good. We know that these new staff are all negative because the government was telling us continually that they don't know who's positive and negative now, and it's the only way to safeguard the residents.
Oh dear.
So we thought that's great. By 11 o'clock on Wednesday morning, the new team have come in, the old team have all departed, and that's when basically things started to go haywire. So all of a sudden, the communication channels broke down. We would ring up to find out, can we Skype? And we were told, no, we're too busy at the moment, we're doing a handover, you need to be patient with us. So we said, it's day one, let's just let this go.
When did it dawn on you that the staff or elements of the staff were struggling with what was going on? I think you alluded to me before the interview that one receptionist reached out and called them patients instead of residents.
Yeah. So on
that sort of made both of you and your wife look at one another and go, "What's going on?"
Yeah, absolutely. So there was 3 phone calls made that day by my wife, and the 3 separate responses we got from the same administration officer there was, the first one was, we were inquiring whether the COVID tests have come back as negative, and the conversation was, if you don't hear from us, it's good news. So that didn't put us at rest. We then rang back a couple of hours later, asking again whether the results had come through, and we were told, if you don't hear from us, it means they're alive.
Oh.
That was quote unquote. And the third time was when kept referring to my mother-in-law as a patient, and then I intervened and said that she's not a patient, she's a resident, right? And she's got the rights to actually hear from her loved ones. Put her through, and the response was, we'll take a message, we'll go and see her, and if she would like to accept your call, we'll ring you back.
Hang on, we need to explain, please, that your mother-in-law is not fit enough.
She's 85 years old.
She's 85,
Alzheimer's.
She's suffering from Alzheimer's, and also needs to be fed, take her medicine. She can't do it herself.
No. So all this. So I actually explained to him that she won't even know what you're talking about if you go and speak to her. So how is this possible? He basically hung the phone up, and that was it. So we didn't hear anything that day. We kept ringing. Once you get past 6 o'clock, you don't get any response from the centre. It's basically just no response at all, right? The next morning, we've kept going through this whole process. Again, no feedback. We'll ring you back. Eventually that night, and my wife keeps referring to her as a guardian angel, a nurse had been brought in to support some of the staff. So one of the
seconded staff who'd come in, who's a genuine nurse,
absolutely,
not a staff member.
Absolutely.
Yep.
She took my wife's details, and she said, before I leave tonight, I will be in contact with you. So roughly 10 o'clock that night, she rang off her private phone.
Wow. And
she said, I'm going to FaceTime your mum, right? And you need to see what's going on in here.
Oh dear.
Right? So she FaceTimed my mother-in-law, who by this stage was basically bedridden, swollen, her lips were swollen. You could see she was dehydrated, just in terms of appearance. Completely, when my wife spoke to her and she heard her voice, completely unresponsive, right? Ouch. And the nurses just said, you guys need to do something. She goes, you need to make some noise, because what's going on in here, I've never seen this in my whole career. The next morning, we banded together with some families, and we got a support group going, and we said we need to start making some noise. And that's eventually how we got onto the media and everything else. Because in essence, from our perspective, if we didn't start rattling the cage, there was going to be no change.
Well, this is where we are at the moment. We're in the studios of TheInformer. Jack Karikas talking with us. Nicole Dunn, who's a professional in the aged care sector, is going to talk to us very, very shortly. We're going to do this in a 2-part setup. This has been part 1 of a special interview with Jack Karikas to give us a sense of the situation, how it's unfolded, and why they've been so concerned for so long, and why things haven't been done in a more ordered fashion. Jack, just before we finish this part of the interview, it's not about trying to find out or throw blame at people. We're trying very much to open the door, give people a sense of what's transpired, yep, and how everyone has had a hand in this situation that's just deteriorated over the past week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the biggest issue here, again, George, not playing a blame game here, is, if we want to use a term, they've parachuted a new crew in with no handover. So you wouldn't do that in any job.
Or any profession.
Anywhere, yeah, right? But here we are, we're talking about human beings and the most vulnerable in our society, and they've brought in individuals who have no history on the needs of the residents, who needs to be fed by hand, who can actually take their medication in whole form or crushed form, etc. They didn't even know which residents resided in which rooms. So I know for a fact that they were actually checking the photos of so the wanderers who were wandering around the halls. They didn't know which rooms they belonged to, and they would go back and match them based on the photos in the rooms.
Jack, we'll continue this in part 2. Thank you. Jack Karikas in the studio on The Informer, talking about the aged care crisis that's enveloped the sector in Victoria, and we need to find out a lot more. So we're going to come back in part 2 and talk to Nicole Dunn, who understands the sector very, very well.